time at 6 p.m., I will call this workshop to order. If we will bow our heads, please, we will have an invocation. Dear Lord, we thank you for waking us this morning. We thank you for allowing us to see another day. We further thank you for allowing us all to assemble here this evening to take additional care of the work that's required for the city of High Springs. We know that you will lead us through what we need to do. You will give us all the guidance that we need. We know that whatever we do here tonight is because it's what you allowed us to do. And we thank you for your grace and for your mercy. These things we ask in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen.
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 All right. Shall we stand and do our pledge of allegiance?
Yes.
I'm going to even stand with you tonight. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Ms. Palmer, roll call, please.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor Williams is absent. Vice Mayor James.
Here.
Commissioner Jamison.
Here.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Lavin.
Here.
All right, thank you, Ms. Palmer. All right, with that, we will go into our item, discussion on the future of the High Springs wastewater and water systems. Who's talking first?
Tim Norman, I believe, is supposed to be leading us off.
All right, Mr. Norman. Is he there?
Both over.
I'm going to transfer Greg Lang too.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Greg Lang with the engineering firm Midtower and Associates. Al.
This is Tim Norman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Good deal. All right. We kind of like to give you an overview here. We're going to be discussing the city's situation with its water and wastewater capacities. As you are probably aware, the city is rapidly approaching capacity in both its water and wastewater plants. And you've got a fair amount of growth going on in the city and looks like more to come in the not distant future. So we kind of want to give you all an overview on that, show you where you're at, and maybe talk about some things that are needed to be done in the future. The first thing we'd like to talk about is your water system, your water plant. Your current water plant is rated for 1.4 million gallons per day maximum daily flow. Just so it'll compare evenly, or with the wastewater plant, that means you've got an average daily flow of roughly 700,000 gallons a day. So with that, your current flows are roughly 617,000. So you're roughly 88% capacity on your water plant. If you look there at the spreadsheet we gave you, there's one there that's got a number of assumptions, which is based on your current building permits, how they're building out. 100 gallons per capita per day, 100 gallons per person per day. And it does not include Terra Meadows, which is a large development we'll talk about here shortly, potential development. Just based on that, at your current rate of growth, we think the water plant will be out of capacity in roughly 2023. So 3 years from now, you're going to be bumping up against your capacity in the water plant. So if you'll look at the next sheet there, you'll see we've added in Terra Meadows, which is a development that's just in the conceptual stages at this point. but it's potentially 1,000 units, and it will have a significant impact on the city's capacities. You can see there in that spreadsheet that if it comes to fruition in 2022, they begin building units and builds out in 2026. You'll see there that our capacity goes negative in 2022 and gets even more so in 2023. Assuming we build a new plant, then we'll be fine. The new plant would be another plant of identical capacity as your existing plant, built at a different location. There's the site up there north of the existing water plant that water management has set aside for the city there. So that's something that the city needs to be thinking about in the not too distant future. Basically, we'd be building a separate identical plant that would, to your existing plant as far as capacity goes, would give you two completely redundant systems. If one plant had catastrophic failure, you'd still have a plant that could provide the city water. So I guess with that, if anyone have any questions as far as the water system and things we're looking at. There's also going to be some improvements to the distribution system. The city has done some of those on an ongoing basis with CDBG projects and other things. There's some improvements there that would need to be done to replace some of the old lines in the system that are going to get worse with age, not better. And those are things that would be done over a period of a number of years, 10, 12, 15 years, basically. Not to do all that at one time would not be affordable for the city. So we do that over a period of time.
So, Mr. Norman, I have a question for you.
Hi,
The site that Swanee River Management District had north of the city, or north of the other side of the road, I've heard that was traded to Loncala, and that site's no longer available. Do you know about that?
That is news to me. That's not my understanding, but I can neither confirm nor deny that. My understanding was that there have been discussions with water management, and that site had been secured. That's the last I heard.
Rodney, do you know anything about that site? Because I understood that was, if there is any land left, it's significantly diminished from the original draft.
Yeah, there's 5 acres set aside for the city.
Okay.
There is 5 acres.
Which is sufficient land to build the water plant. What we need is setback distances from the wells. If that land around it is going to stay as timber production, that won't be an issue. If it obviously becomes development where there's potential for contamination, then that would be a different story.
Okay. Thank you.
A question, Tim. This is Jameson.
Yes, sir.
You're only factoring in Terra Meadows. So I guess my question would be on the water and on the sewer when we're going to get to this. What do we currently have on the books that we have approved, that we basically has signed off on? Because I'm assuming there's more than just Terra Meadows that you got Oak Ridge, which is going to.
That is correct. And if you look there and on the left side of the column, you'll see projected system growth from other developments,
Where's that at?
If you look on the left side of the chart, you'll see the 1, 2, 3, the fourth column, projected system-wide population growth in persons. You're seeing that each year where that's coming from. So that's accounting. What we've basically done is taken your current building permit rate, what you're seeing now. Your planner had projected some growth for the city. I think it underestimates that, but I used their proportional growth. It decreased over time. You'll see there as the number of system-wide growth.
Where? I apologize. I'm not.
The fourth column on the spreadsheet there, projected system-wide growth in persons, projected per capita demand, 100 gallons per capita per day. And then the next column, the sixth column over, is increase in system-wide demand.
Okay.
Is 27,000. So that's accounting for the other growth that's occurring in the system. I did not go through and look at every development and see how many units were in it and that kind of thing. We did not do that. We thought this was a better estimation of what would occur. What we don't want to have happen is what happened back in the housing crisis, where everyone went out and built plants for all this potential growth that may occur. Of course, it never came to fruition. It's coming to fruition now, 10, 15 years later. But what we don't want to have is a situation where on paper you're at capacity, but actual building is not taking place, and you've built something you can't really take full advantage of. But we did account for other system growth besides just the Terra Meadows, and that's what's reflected in those numbers I just described.
Okay, so let me just make sure on this one here, and you got it. So like we got Oak Ridge, and we've gotten Bruce, you chime in on this because I asked the question. So all the things that we have right now that have been approved, they're building. Those numbers are in here on this one here. So there's nothing else. So everybody that we're future that's on the books right now that they've done it, they're involved in this. There's no development that's sitting out there waiting to get it. All these have been approved.
No, Terra Meadows has not been approved. Terra Meadows is a conceptual deal that we're still in the discussion phase with the developer on. We have a couple more that are out there that we're in the discussion phase on as well, but that is all we are at this point, is the discussion phase. So Oak Ridge 3 and 4 is looking at approximately 48 more homes, I believe. You still got Bailey, which is looking at being approved or has been approved at this point, which is doing their expansion on homes. So those are the ones that are kicking up right now. We're running about 10 permits a month out of the building department right now, on average.
Okay. I just, again, I'm going to be dense on this one because you got to help me. I just want to make sure that if somebody comes in now and they're building, we have the water that we've approved. They've got the plats, they're going, they're building their homes. We have the water to supply them till how long?
Looking at this table, based on what I've projected growth-wise, if you look there in 2023, we're going to start eating into our peak factor in the water plant. That was just for sake of things. In 2023, at the growth we've projected, you will start running out of water capacity.
Okay, so in 2023, so that's 2 years away. How long is it going to take us to build this thing?
It's roughly 3 years away in the 2023. It's going to, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to design, to fund it, design, and construct it.
Okay, say that again.
It's going to be, I would say, 2.5 to 3 years to plan, fund, and design and construct the facility.
So we should have started 6 months ago on this.
It's something that the city will need to make a decision on in the near future. That is certainly true.
So didn't we have this conversation about a year ago and approve applying for the state revolving loan fund? Didn't we have this discussion last year?
Yes, ma'am, we did, and we submitted a request for inclusion, which is the first step in getting that funding. And we were told by the previous public works director to put that project on the shelf. So it did. We withdrew the request for inclusion at the city's direction.
Okay.
So Tim, real quick, just for clarity, without Terra Meadows, you take them out of the equation. What is the timeline?
We're probably looking at 2023. We're going to be bumping up against capacity. Now, water plants are a little different. There's a peak factor there. I know that gets technical, but we can probably, maybe buy a little more time with that. But 2023, in that vicinity, we need to start having a new plant online.
So Bruce, I know you said 10 permits a month, but what I need to know, and I don't need it tonight, but how many approved units are out there at Bailey Estates or, the other subdivisions that we've approved those units? How many approved units are out there already that are going to be coming to permit over the next 2 years or 3 years? Can you get me some kind of number maybe this week on that?
Yes, ma'am. I can do that.
Thank you.
Well, we would all want that because that's the question that we've asked is what is currently on the books? And that's basically, you said it much more eloquently than I did, Nancy. But that's basically, we need to know what we have basically approved from the city is what subdivisions have we actually done. They may not be building for a year, but we've approved them to do it. And I guess that's my question. We need to know what is on the books now that has been absolutely approved, be it a year from now or down the road. And we need to know it. Now this is an estimate, but I mean, I'm just saying we should have a rock solid number of what's been approved. It should not be a guess. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
So that number needs to be given to Tim and them. Basically, here's the actual number that we have on file. This is what the city is committed to. This is what we're allowing to go forth, be it 6 months, a year and a half, whatever. This is what we've committed. My concern is we got, and I want to make on this one here, we've got the commitment to all of these. How then does that equate to the capacity? Not an estimate. This is what we've approved. This is what our capacity is, and this is when we're gonna, and I understand, Tim, you guys did this on projections. I got that. Believe me, thank you. But we should have a number that we can give and estimate that out so we can actually have more factual, because I'll be honest with you, at some point in time, if we're going to do this thing, we may have to sit there and start saying, hey, we may not be able to approve some stuff. I mean, I don't know when that happens, and I don't want to do this one here, but is there a way, Bruce and Tim, and this one here, is there a way that this can be a more, is it possible to get a more exact number that if we were to give you now and what we have approved going forward, if they gave you those numbers, would that?
Sure, we can certainly give you an idea of you know, with those numbers, if everything built out, this is where you would be. This is how much capacity would be consumed. We can certainly do that.
I'd like that in the water and the sewer, if we could get them those numbers, exact numbers that we've already approved. They're on the books, they're set to go. And then let's take that's a real number that we can use. Tim, you guys can sit there and then figure out the capacity part of it. Then, at least in my mind, and I'm a layman, and I'm just a general deal, but if you sat there and you told me, you say, Scott, we got 250 homes that we've committed. This is a number now. We got 250 homes that we have committed. We've signed off. They're going to basically do it. This is what their capacity is. This is where we're at number-wise.
Right.
That would make sense to me as far as basically sitting there. And then if you tell me it's 3 years to get the water plant, then we got real-time numbers and real-time strategy to sort of figure this thing out. Water thing needs to be started. We need to go back several months. We need to start it. But if you could do those numbers and then the city could present them to us on the deal, I would feel more comfortable than knowing where we're at from a structural type standpoint, and if that makes sense. Thank you.
We can certainly do that. One thing just to keep in mind, I kind of referenced it before, you know, what we don't want to see the city do, and we've said this to you since we started working for you, and the ideal thing is we get the capacity just in time because we're trying to maximize your customer base. What we don't want to do is there's a large number of development comes in, say it's Terra Meadows, and say we're going to build 1,000 units. All of a sudden we say, well, there's 1,000 units reserved for them. Well, if it takes them 20 years to build those 1,000 units, we've built facilities that we aren't getting maximum beneficial use out of. So what our strategy is to minimize impact on rates and existing customers is to try to get that new capacity in place just in time where we've maximized that customer base and move forward that way. Because again, that happened back in the housing boom. Everyone went out and built all these huge plants and the development never came because on paper they were at capacity, but you know, actual flow they weren't. So we're trying to guard against that as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I understand exactly what you're saying, and we can provide that.
Because
To the best, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nancy.
Because if we've approved these units, then when they come for a building permit, we can't say, geez, we're sorry. You know, we need to look at that now so that we can plan, do we need to keep bringing these developments online? Are we going to be able to meet that need? And, you know, that's part of our planning process that we don't always have that information when we've got one of those projects sitting in front of us. So, Mr. Norman, I think that it's not just about this workshop, but going forward, how we look at developments as they come to us for review, okay?
Okay, understood.
So let me ask you this, Tim, when you guys doing this one here on this water deal, do we have something in place like a timeline, a series of events that we got to go that the city administration is aware of and we know, and this time we better be doing this, or is this something you guys are doing? Because what I don't want to see this, and in the sewer, is there be a time lapse, and then all of a sudden we're sitting there having to, because we're going to have to figure out how to fund this baby too.
Yes, we are, and that's like I say that you know the on the water side, you know, it's our recommendation to the city that you begin the planning process, and you got to do, engineering reports and request funding and do design and those things. And that takes, like I say, 2.5 to 3 years to make happen. And if that all comes to fruition, we'll be okay capacity wise based on the projections. But that needs to be started in the very near term.
Okay.
I say she needs to be restarted is what needs to happen.
Okay, so can you guys give us something that basically tells us, and I know this is elementary on the deal, but what you just said, I want to make sure we fully understand what has to be done. Can you guys create a timeline that basically says this needs to be done, very specifically, this needs to be done? Because we're in the middle of a city manager issue right here. And what I don't want this thing doing is dropping. And while we're going through transition with the new city manager, everything sort of gets pushed to the side and we don't do it. Somebody is going to have to stay on top of this and make darn sure that whatever needs to be brought to the commission to be voted on or determined needs to be done in a timely manner, and we're not rushing the heck out of it at the end. So I don't know how that works, but if there's some way you can lay this thing out and then we can have it done, because this is something we can't, and we've already done it now. And the sewer is the same thing.
Yes.
Okay.
So Rodney, can I ask you, haven't we consulted with South Rural Water Management, the nonprofit firm
Yes.
that helps small communities? Can you give us some information on that? You had sent something to us that they had some help available. Can you give us some information on that?
That was on the third well out there at the water plant, just so we can do some maintenance on these older wells that we have. So we're still going through with that project, aren't we?
So that project is really to help sustain and support the existing wells
Yes.
in the event that one of those goes down, so we can maintain our capacity, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so that doesn't count for any future growth use. And we have not started the engineering on that project either, have we?
Yes, we have. We're in the permitting process of it right now.
Okay, so you've gotten the engineering approval on that. We made the fee, whatever we needed to do to move forward with that.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. And anytime I get anything new, I'll bring it to you guys.
Thank you.
Very good.
And we'll put together a timeline as to what needs to happen when, from conception through construction for the water plant. We can certainly do that.
And can you give us the estimated cost at each of those junctions where we need to fund, Mr. Norman? Because that's the other big key piece of that, is we've got to know how much money we need to have at each of those points for engineering, permitting, whatever is involved.
Yes, ma'am. We're envisioning you'll go to the state revolving fund for that. Now, unfortunately, the city does not qualify for grant funding based on your median household income, but they provide the money for the engineering and construction. So there's a multi-step process to make that happen, but they provide the funding at each step of the way.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I guess, do we want to go on and talk about impact of if Terra Meadows takes place? You'll see the spreadsheet there and similar information, but it just shows you that we'll get there a little quicker, and they'll have a significant impact on the city. You'll see at the 2040 water demand without Terra Meadows is 1,081,000. With Terra Meadows, it's 1,328,000 gallons a day. So the city will be using, of course, more water if that development moves forward and takes place.
Okay.
All right, and just to give you all a rough idea on the new water plant that we're talking about, these are the numbers that we pulled from the previous request for inclusion on the SRF funding for the water system. We got a total estimated construction cost, round numbers, of $5 million, and with engineering, it's 5.8 or $6 million. But round numbers, you're looking at $6 million on the water system to build the new plant and run 21,000 foot of 12-inch main in the north section over there. That just gives you some idea of what that phase would cost. Any more questions on the water side?
There was a question from somebody on the chat, Kevin Can you read that one? Wasn't there a question from someone on the chat about the wells?
It says 2 questions there right now on the chat.
Yes, ma'am. We're asking when it's time for public comment. For those who have the questions, please raise their hands so we have all matters of questions on public record.
All right.
Would you like to do that now, Vice Mayor?
Yes, we can.
All right, Mr. Ambrose, I will bring you over to speak. All right, Mr. Ambrose, you've been brought over.
Muted right now, Kevin.
Ross, if you can unmute yourself.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry about that. My question has to do with the 2 current wells that are, I believe, 43 years old. There's the well itself and there's the pump. What typically is the life expectancy of those? Aside from the life expectancy of those, the last 2 large storm events, when we had flooding on the Santa Fe, it's my recollection or understanding that we had to take a well offline. So the question then becomes, if we had to take a well offline because of flooding, what real capacity can we serve with our current well field over the next 3 years?
The wells are basically, it's going to cut the capacity in half, obviously, if you lose one well. So you would be able to produce about 700,000 gallons of water a day max if one well is out of service. As part of the improvements we were discussing, the price tag I gave earlier, we're looking to rehabilitate the existing wells and put in new well pumps. Typical well life with a steel casing is 40 to 50 years. So those pumps are nearing the end of those wells are nearing the end of their life, and we'd have to rehabilitate those and put in new casings, line those wells to restore their life, and put in new pumps. It's part of what we're proposing. If that answered your question.
Okay, so it does, and I guess Rodney would know more about how storm events that last for multiple days have impacted our wells. Are we really at a more critical situation where if we lost a well due to weather or maintenance, where we would really be in trouble? I mean, it's just my question.
Rodney?
Rodney, can you answer that?
Okay, I'm trying to figure Bruce's computer out. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
We hear you.
Yeah, no, it's very nerve-wracking as your operator. When COVID started, we lost the pump on well 1, and then I was running off a well that hasn't been touched in the 15 years that I've been working for the city. So this is where we're at with that, and then we do see some iron bacteria on well 1. So I periodically have to have that one pulled and cleaned and acid washed. So yes, that's the reason I'm trying to get this 3rd one put in place.
Okay. So if we move forward with this 3rd one, realistically, how soon would we have that back up for these wells that are at the end of their life expectancy?
But we're in the permitting process right now, so I'm not too sure this is the first time I've ever been involved in this. So
okay.
Rodney, let me ask you a question. Is there somebody you could call and get a ballpark?
I sure can. I can.
Let's get a ballpark time frame. At least that way we would have an idea on when they anticipate. I would also say along that line is at some point in time, we're going to actually have to, maybe we're going to have to actually sign whatever the agreement is and
come up with the money.
Yeah,
So the money we can, not to do it, the money, fortunately, I think we've got set aside, but we got to approve the project. So, but if you could get a time frame, I think that would be, thanks, Rod.
You're welcome.
Rodney, were you aware that the proposed from Mid-Tower included recasing those wells? Were you aware that was part of the overall process there?
I didn't.
You didn't hear me, or you didn't know?
No, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did not. I didn't.
Okay, because if those two wells were redone, that would certainly take us a long way with capacity, having 3 wells over there on that site, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And our plan is to have 2 new wells at the new site in addition to that, so.
Excellent. Very good.
All right. Any more questions on the water side?
Mayor, we have one question. Ms. Whites has raised her hand. I can bring her over if you like.
no, yes. If our question is on water.
Ms. Whites, you've been brought over. If your question's about water, you can speak to the commission and Mr. Norman now.
She's muted, Kevin.
She has to unmute herself.
Hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I had a question about the well construction detail, Rodney, for well number 3. Did you not say that that was going to be a 16-inch well, and the current wells that are in production are 12-inch?
I don't have that paperwork in front of me, but I believe it is a 16-inch.
Okay, and is the casing depth going to be similar with the
It
same
is
amount of overall?
pretty similar to what's already there.
Okay, so when we get a third well online, we'll actually have a little bit more capacity. It's not necessarily linear.
Right.
Okay.
And
And then the new wells that are proposed for the new site, is well construction detail for that similar to the new third well at the current well field?
That'd be right, Jim.
Yeah, the well construction, again, we have to look and see what the geology is and see if it's difference in elevation and what the geology shows. But I mean, all the wells are fairly similar construction.
Yeah.
Potable wells are all fairly similar for domestic use.
Yeah, understood. So I'm assuming that the 2 new wells at the new well field would also probably be at least 16 inches?
I'm possibly, but I'm not saying that at this point. We haven't gotten that far. It's just conceptual at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Is that our last water question?
Yes, ma'am. There are no further hands being raised right now.
All right, Mr. Norman.
Okay, we'll talk about wastewater. Again, we did a similar type spreadsheet. Your wastewater plant is rated for 240,000 gallons a day. We're flowing in the neighborhood of 190,000 gallons, going up all the time. We're going to be having of course, we've got a project that's under construction now to eliminate more septic tanks. That's going to add about 6,500 gallons to flow to that, we estimate. So, but with the same growth, we got a little lower projected per capita usage. Your wastewater usage is lower than your water usage. That plant's going to be out of capacity, close to the end of 2021. We had hoped to tell you that we had funding for the expansion, but unfortunately, Water Management and DEP decided to allocate their money elsewhere. So the funding for the wastewater plant expansion, which we were relatively confident would occur, is not going to happen in this go around. So we'll certainly try to get in line for future, but again, the city's going to need to make a decision here, as far as, because it's going to take, we were hoping to be under construction in 2021 if we had the money, but looks like that's not going to be the case. So city can, either elect to fund it through another source, which would be, potentially SRF again. There'd be no grant money associated with that. You can try to get back in line for funding from Water Management. But again, that's a decision the city will need to make here in the not too distant future. Now, I did talk with DEP today, Jeff Martin at DEP, who's the permitting person there at that, and we discussed about potentially re-rating the existing plant, getting a little more capacity out of it. We'd have to do an analysis of the various components, but we might be able to get a 10%, maybe 15% increase in the interim, them knowing we're building a new plant, we might be able to buy a little bit of time there. So we're going to look at doing that. No guarantees on that either, but that may buy us some time where we won't be out of compliance. But again, if we're not able to secure Springs funding, which we thought we have a good chance of getting Springs funding last time, there is alternative water supply. Our project has been put in that category as well. We don't know the likelihood of funding from that, but you know, if we wait a whole year to come around to Springs funding again and we don't get funded again, then we may be in a difficult situation with the growth continuing. Any questions on that? You'll see a similar type chart. That's without Terra Meadows. Obviously, if Terra Meadows comes in, if that does occur and they build as they say, we're going to be out of capacity pretty quick. Once we have the new plant expansion, it won't be, but 2026 or so, based on those projections, we'll be out of capacity again. So
where's that on? Somebody use the thing and show me on the deal.
That's on the second sheet. It says including Terra Meadows. You'll see on the first sheet if we expect to have about 20,000 gallons of capacity left at the end of 2021. And hoping the new plant would go online at the end of 2021, which now doesn't look very encouraging. We would have sufficient capacity, to run you through down to 2035. And then at that point, the city will be looking at another expansion if growth occurs as projected. That's the first sheet, excluding Terra Meadows. If we include Terra Meadows, if the city does decide to take on that development, you'll see, even if we expand the plant, that by 2026, we'll be out of capacity again. So the city would need to find additional capacity and effluent disposal capacity as well.
Tim, can I ask a question?
Yes.
The money that we've already gotten for the wetlands.
Yes.
So I know that we resubmitted and combined the two projects together, and I think it came out to like 5.4, something like that.
It comes out to basically the shortfall to expand the plant, build phase 1 of the wetlands, came out to about $4.8 million. That doesn't include the phase 2 of the wetlands. At that point, we'd have 320,000 gallons of disposal capacity, which would buy us time. Our thought would be we'd get back in line for Springs funding to build the second phase of the wetlands, hoping that'd be 100% grant funded, but that was the plan there.
So the shortfall is the 4.8.
Correct.
And on the revolving fund, and maybe Greg, this is a question for you. Do you know what the interest rate is?
It's typically going to be, what we're seeing is about 1%.
Okay, thank you.
So it's a very good interest rate. It's a 20-year loan, 1% interest, give or take.
Oh, it's only 20 years, not 40?
They only go 20, right? Rural development is 40 years.
Yeah.
SRF is only 20 years.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Jennifer, can you give us some real numbers by email of what that looks like in a payment on a bond? Okay, those numbers you're talking with at 1% for 20 years. Can you send that to us so we have some real monthly, annual numbers that you're having to come up with to be able to meet those obligations?
Yes, I can. I'll also do it for the 6 million for the water as well. And then I'll see if I can get some rates from USDA, because there may be we may have to go the 40 years. Unfortunately, that's where we are right now with the bonds for the wastewater.
Just USDA, your rates are going to be higher. They're going to be
right.
Probably a couple of points higher than what SRF is going to be, but there's a longer payback period, so you have to weigh those two.
Correct. So I will get that together.
Is there any possibility for community block development grants to cover any portion of this?
Typically, CDBG, to do a plant thing that serves the whole city, the city would have to be 51% low to moderate income, and you don't meet that criteria. So we can work in certain areas of the city that qualify, but we can't do a citywide project with CDBG.
Okay.
And those are typically only $700,000. With $700,000 is real money, certainly, but it's they're limited to $700,000 for High Springs.
Do we have any other questions from the commissioners?
Well, yeah, real quick, I guess I would ask the same question on this one here, the same numbers for the sewer, like I said, on the water. I'd like to know how many we actually have, what's the capacity, so we can sit there and say, this is how many we have on the books. I would just like, that's what I would like to know. Part of the deal, guys, I don't, and this is me now, I don't want to see a real big chart like this. This is good. I just simply want it to be very simple. This is how many sewers you have, be it gravity fed or grinder pump. This is the capacity. This is how many units we have that are out there to be put in. We've already approved it. With the addition of those, it pushes our capacity to this number. And then again, if it comes to a point where if we don't get the funding, then a decision, I don't want to have to backtrack. Then the decision has to be, we have to look there and see, are we willing to pay whatever the rate is on this one here, or do we stall things? And when I first got on the commission, we did a moratorium there. When I first got on it, we stopped it because we weren't able to do stuff. So I'm just saying, I'd like to be able to see what the actual numbers are, and then let's make an educated decision as to how we move going forward. Because as Nancy said earlier, in the same thing, we don't want to be out there and have people coming in and ready to start building homes. They got their plats, and we sit there and say, sorry, bud, we ain't got it. So I apologize if I'm being redundant, but I would just like to have those real life numbers that I can look at simply and sit there and say, okay, we're good until this, and then we can manage it as we go. But we need to start. I mean, the clock's running.
So, Mr. Norman, the wetlands project, phase 1, phase 2, do we have funding for that?
We have funding for phase 1.
Okay. And does that increase our capacity, or?
That does not increase your capacity.
Okay.
It will increase your disposal capacity a little bit, but it doesn't increase your treatment capacity. So,
okay, so I have to ask JC, the wetlands project, is that going to create more work for you, or the need for more staff on your end over there at the plant?
Yes.
Okay, have we funded that?
We're looking to see what we do about it, but no, but as far as we know, we haven't funded yet. It's still gonna need mowing, and I know I've spoken to Team Norman and one of the meetings we had last time, and he said it'll be like 6 to 7, maybe 8 years before we have to pull weeds out of there. But we're still gonna have to do some maintenance on it, like mowing and whatever else comes up with it.
So why are we doing this wetlands project if it's not increasing capacity?
it will increase capacity in conjunction with the one. It provides a higher level of treatment. So we've got to meet a 3 total nitrogen coming out of the plant now, since you're in a spring shed. So we're doing that with the wetlands instead of on the treatment side of things. But we're taking away 1/2 of the spray field to put in wetlands. Your current spray fields have a capacity of 240,000 gallons a day, which matches your treatment capacity. We're going to convert those spray fields to wetlands in 2 phases. Each will provide, one wetland will provide 240,000, phase 2 will provide 240,000. We'll have a total of 480,000 gallons of wetlands capacity and disposal capacity when both phases are built. But we can't just increase the disposal capacity and not increase the treatment capacity. We got to have both of them to have total capacity there, if that makes sense. Not really, but that's why we pay the engineers, right? We want to make sure you understand.
Exactly right.
We'll have 320,000 gallons of disposal capacity when the first phase of the wetlands built, but our treatment capacity will remain at 240,000 gallons.
Okay. I just am concerned that we're adding something onto our staff, additional staffing needs, and we're not, it's not going to increase the capacity. So now it becomes a burden to the staff, and we've got to figure out how we're going to make sure that that's taken care of, because that's problem that we've had ongoing in our Public Works Department, not having enough staff to do the job correctly. So that's my concern on that particular project. When is that supposed to come on board, Mr. Norman, this wetland?
Well, we were hoping it'd be built in conjunction with the wastewater plant. Since that hasn't happened, we're going to have to build it separately, it looks like. We'll do it. We were waiting to do it in conjunction with the plant expansion, but now the plant expansion is going to be delayed. We'll go ahead and get the wetlands underway. It's been designed, so it's waiting. We'll just have to get ready to go to bid and finalize the permit.
But Tim, isn't what we were funded based on your projections?
It's a little short. It's a little short.
Quite a bit, like $1 million short.
It wasn't $1 million, but it's short. So.
And so that could definitely be a problem because we are not in a place where, you know, we've just talked about $12 million in the last 5 minutes, okay? And this city, we don't have $12 million sitting in the bank. So that's a serious discussion, you know, that we need to see where we need to allocate those funds and how we're going to find the funds, how are we going to fund that and over what period of time. So Jennifer, we need to have those numbers. Obviously, before we start the wetlands project, we need to know that it's going to be sustainable and that it's going to give us the bang for our buck if we're going to spend $1 million on it. Okay.
Right.
That's for sure. If it's not going to give us what we need to put the money someplace where we can get what we need. Do we have any other questions from the commissioners?
Tim, real quick, Tim, explain again, because I think I understand the wetlands. Explain again the reason why we even went into the wetlands and what is the purpose behind it.
Okay. The new rules, since High Springs is in a spring shed, you have to meet a 3 total nitrogen out of your wastewater plant to land apply effluent. The wetlands will provide that capability. So it's going to increase disposal and it's going to provide a higher level of treatment. So it's doing both with a disposal and a treatment segment. So that's why we're doing that. Otherwise, you'd have to build more tankage and things like that at the plant site to meet the 3 total nitrogen.
Right. So when you do the wetlands, you combine the 2 into 1. If you didn't do that, the alternative, what would it end up being?
Well, you'd have to build more tankage and process units at the plant to meet that, which there's a significant cost with that. And if you didn't use the wetlands, we'd have to go to increase spray field and build more spray field to get increased disposal capacity. But the wetlands will get rid of more water on the same footprint as the spray field does.
Right. Okay.
So Mr. Trigar asked a question, and he actually is someone that I've met with, and I know he taught me a lot about sewer. I don't know if he can raise his hand or do whatever he needs to do to ask his question.
Vice Mayor, we've got 2 folks their hand raised, Mr. Ambrose and Mr. Trigar. I'll bring Mr. Trigar over first since Commissioner Levin mentioned him.
All right.
Mr. Trigar, you're on with the commission.
Is he muted?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. My question is, what additional work will the High Springs wastewater plant staff have to do with wetlands versus the spray field that they currently have, and additional duties would be needed of the staff, and what kind of training will they need to help them operate that part of the plant in addition to what they already do? Thank you.
As far as the wetlands go, there's certainly things to learn, but there's no real formal training that takes place. There's some O&M manuals and things like that. With the wetlands, there's not a lot to do initially in the wetlands. We're actually going to save power. Before we were pumping the water out there under a high pressure for the irrigation guns at the spray field to work. The wetlands where we had 75 horsepower pumps, we'll probably be using 10 horsepower. There'll be some power savings with the wetland side of things, but after a period of time, as gentleman said, JC said, after 8-10 years, the vegetation will become so dense that you have to clean it out, which typically, you're going to bring in bulldozers and things like that, you'll take out one cell and you'll clean that out and replant it. So there is going to be a cost every 8 to 10, 12 years. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of maintenance that's required. Now, you have to mow berms and things like that, but staff also has to mow the spray field as well. So it's that kind of thing. So I don't envision there being a lot of additional maintenance costs or requirements on the wetlands initially until it comes time to harvest the plants out of there when they just get choked and too full. We've done one in Hilliard, and they're just now doing it, and we put that in 8 or 10 years ago, and they're just now finally doing something, but they've really had no maintenance to speak of in the interim.
And we had a comment, Vice Mayor, from Mr. Ambrose. He'd like to ask another question. I'm going to bring him over now.
All right.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hey. So when the city first moved forward with the sewer plant and the sewer system, they made a decision that the first tank would be a steel tank, and that had a fixed life capacity. But they thought that they'd have a second tank in that would be concrete before that lifespan was up. Where is the lifespan of the current steel tank at the plant? And is that a maintenance concern? Because that's the only place that the waste has to go to start. So where is the city at? And what would does the city have a plan if there becomes a maintenance issue and that tank has to be taken offline for any sort of maintenance work?
I'm happy to answer that. The second tank proposed, the second treatment unit, is going to be in a concrete tank. So we've designed for a concrete tank. We're going to rehabilitate the existing tank, which means we'll go through, sandblast it, paint it, do all those things to restore it back to its original condition. So hopefully we can extend its life again. But certainly you are correct. Steel tanks do not last as long as concrete tanks do, especially in a wastewater environment.
So how many years was this tank expected to last, and how many years has it been in service?
I've seen steel tanks at a number of our communities that were put in 1985. They're 35 years old, and they're still working. They need work. Again, it's something that you have to take down and repaint every 15 years typically is probably a good number. So again, they can last a long time if you maintain them. If you do no maintenance and let the coatings go, they will deteriorate rather quickly once those coatings fail.
Okay, so if you have to recoat every 15 years and you can get 35 years out of them, this tank has been in service 18 years and never been recoated?
But as part of the plant expansion coming up, it will be rehabilitated. That is part of what we're going to do in the plant expansion. We'll build the new plant, divert all the flow to it. That allows us to take the old one down and refurbish it.
Okay, but that's years away, right?
Well, we hope not. We hope it's not too many years away, but it's a couple years away.
Okay. I mean, I appreciate your information. I'm just curious, should we be concerned about a failure in the tank at this point because we can't take it offline for maintenance? That's really, what's the level of concern? Like, possible, but no big deal, or it should be a heightened awareness?
It's always desirable in treatment things to have two trains that you can take one train down and still use the other one on a short-term basis while you're doing maintenance. That's not the situation that's out there. The city did just redo the air header on that because it corroded away, and they just spent money to redo the air header on that tank because it was in bad shape. But in looking at the tank itself, I don't see any serious, I can't look below the water line. I can't see that. But in looking at the exterior of the tank, I don't see any serious areas of corrosion or things like that. So it looks like the tank's in relatively good shape at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Ross. Kevin, do we have anybody else out there?
No, ma'am. There are no hands at this time.
No hands at this time.
I did want to ask a couple of questions of Tim, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Tim, if you don't mind, have you looked at our impact fee funds and factored that in? I have no idea. I'm sure you and Jennifer have talked about.
Yes, that was one of the things I had on the agenda, that I think, with the situation, the impact fees, I think last time we looked at those was probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. Obviously, with the city on the verge of potentially doing 2 expansions, we certainly need to relook at those and have that new development, capture as much of the cost as we can. So I think those need to be relooked at with the projected cost for the new facilities, and would recommend the city do that sooner rather than later.
What about existing impact fees as far as the funding is concerned? What is in the funds, and have you all factored that into both?
I do not know what the dollar amounts. Jennifer might know what's in that. I do not know what that dollar amount is.
I'm thinking somewhere around $500,000. We did use about $500,000 for the engineering of the plant, the new plant, the expansion.
Jennifer, is that in, is there 250 in water, 250 in wastewater, or it's a combined fund, or?
It's separated out, but the wastewater has about 5 times as much.
Okay.
The ratio is like 2,120 for wastewater and 250 for water. And I think if you remember, Mr. Booth had brought this up, that we were going to have to, at some point, flip it and go high on the water. But I think what Tim's saying now is, since we're not getting the funding, we're going to have to go high possibly on both of them to help fund for future impact.
And other communities do have, substantial water and sewer impact fees, because that way the new growth is paying for the infrastructure that's required. And our current resident tax base cannot carry that expansion for new growth. It's just not possible under the tax base that we currently have. So I think that, Scott, we need to definitely look at this. We need to have that on our agenda soon, because we definitely need to be making sure that the growth is paying for the expansion of the facilities.
In my view, that I know we worked with Greg and Tim previously on that, but you need to have a study which correlates the charge for the impact fee to the actual funding, and so that those 2 things need to run together. And so that's something that perhaps at one of our upcoming commission meetings, that perhaps if Greg and Tim could give us some advice on that, maybe perhaps some costs associated with such a study, I think that would be very, very helpful. It sounds like to me.
We can certainly do that.
I'm sorry?
We can certainly do that.
When will we be in consent order world? What do you anticipate as far as that's concerned?
Well, I'm not saying you'll be under a consent order. Again, again, depending how things play out, we're not in consent order at the moment. We are, nudging up on capacities. Again, based on my discussions with Mr. Martin at DEP, we might be able to re-rate the wastewater plant and buy a little little capacity there. So, but we won't be able to double it by doing that, but we can maybe get 10% more than where we're at right now.
Can you explain to the commission what we're talking about as far as consent order world?
Right. Basically what that is, if the city is in violation of something, DEP will prepare a legal document, a consent order, that the city agrees to do certain things to get back in compliance by a certain time. And if, assuming you're meeting the milestones in progress, you're okay. If you don't meet the consent order, then either you get an extension or they start fining you.
Is there a certain percentage when we hit that percentage, we are looked at to be under that kind of regime, Tim?
Well, again, right now, based on your capacity, you have to do what's called a capacity. I'm talking about the wastewater side. A capacity analysis report. Typically those are every 5 years, because the city's plan is so close to capacity. We have to do one every year. So there's a capacity analysis report that we present to DEP that shows where the city's at capacity wise and where it's projected to be in the next 5 years. We've been doing those every year for the last few years. So DEP is aware of where we're at as far as capacity and flows are. But one thing about consent orders, they can be bad, but sometimes they can get you additional funding if you're under consent order. But so they're a double-edged sword.
Is there other methodologies that we can, I'm speaking to the wastewater treatment side now, Tim. Are there other methodologies that we can use to expand the efficiencies as far as the treatment capacity in the wastewater treatment side that are maybe, Band-Aids? I heard what you said, we might get 15 to 20, I think you said
10 to 15.
Just by virtue of re-rating the plant, are there things that can be done as well that may cost a little bit of money, but not to the extent of building an entire new facility that could give us additional efficiencies, Tim?
There's really not. That's one of the difficulties with wastewater. It's, you can't increase the capacity incrementally. I mean, it's typically, you can't just go build a little small tank and set it off to the side. You almost have to duplicate what you've got. So, and which is, the path we're headed on. But there's really not an easy way to incrementally increase a wastewater plant.
What was your estimate? I was having some technical difficulties when I started, so I may have missed it, but did you say 6 million on the water side and about 6 million as well on the sewer side? Is that what your estimate is?
It's for the wastewater, to build the second treatment train and the first phase of the wetlands, we're estimating is $4.8 million. An additional $4.8 million is what the city would need.
And that is, I thought that was solely as to expanding or creating the wetlands.
That's building the treatment plant and building phase 1 of the wetlands. We have 1.464 million from Swanee River to build phase 1 of the wetlands, but to build that plus the treatment plant, we need about another 4.8 million.
And what is phase 2 and how much will that be?
Phase 2 of the wetlands is about $2 million, and we would hope we could get in line and get Springs money to build that. But again, no guarantee of that. But that would give the city 320,000 gallons of capacity in the short term, which will buy you several years. And we're hoping during that time we can get the other, I guess it's 1.8 million to build phase 2 of the wetlands, taking you to the 480,000 gallon total.
So we're talking about funding of about little over 10 million, probably 11 million then total for the water and wastewater.
You're in that range, yes, sir.
And if I'm understanding you correctly, even with Terra Meadows being approved, we're looking, and if we can do all of what you're talking about, we're probably putting ourselves timeline out to 2026. Do I understand that?
That's right. If Terra Meadows occurs and has the growth as projected, our plant expansion will be consumed in 2026.
And shouldn't we, if we're looking at a 5-year period, 5-6-year period, shouldn't we be looking at, okay, what should we be planning to do come 2026, Tim?
Yes, that would be something we'd need to look at. Again, that gets back to the decision on what happens with Terra Meadows. Does the city say, yes, we're going to serve them, or no, we're not? It obviously has a big impact on that.
And keep in mind, Terra Meadows is conceptual at this point. We've only had conversations with them. We don't even have a packet from them at this point. So this is no different than any other conversations with any other developers at this point at a consensual or just conceptual basis. So we don't have an official request for Terra Meadows at this point. We've had some conversations with some engineers, but that's it.
That's very helpful, Bruce. Can you all be prepared to talk about more? Does Commissioner Jameson brought up the issue of moratoriums. When and how quickly do we need to start that discussion, guys? I think that would be also extremely helpful to us to know when do we get to a stage that we need to look at that very seriously. It doesn't sound like we're there yet, is what I'm hearing from you, but if I'm understanding it correctly.
I mean, based on what we're, as far as the wastewater, if the city does not expand the plant, if the expansion doesn't occur, probably by the end of 2021 or very close to it, you'll be bumping up against your capacity. Again, if we can buy a little more time, maybe it's 2022, but it's not far away.
So Tim, you and I had a phone conversation, and I think this will clear it up. If we have, say, approximately 25,000 gallons of sewer left in the plant, we're pulling 10 permits a month. What are the home equivalencies of sewer that are left? How many homes could we approximately put online? What would that number be? 180, 160?
Yeah, I'll tell you what that is here. We're saying right now, at the end of 2020, we're going to have 44,000 gallons remaining. And that would be 293 homes, assuming 150 gallons per day per household, which is what historically High Springs has been.
So we're running about somewhere between 175 during the weekdays and 190 on the weekends on sewer capacity, correct?
Yes.
On usage?
Yes, I mean, that's basically the numbers I've got. That's what I'm saying. You'll have about 44,000 gallons remaining at the end of 2020.
So at our current building rate, it's safe to say in about 18 months we'd be at capacity, being conservative with
Pretty
the
close.
percentage.
Yes, I would say that'd be a fair assessment. 18 to 24 months.
Are you able to operate above capacity, Tim?
Well,
Rodney, question too.
I mean, at some point, obviously, if the capacity continues to grow, and the plant's only designed for so much, so at some point there's operational issues, and you start having effluent violations, and you do get those consent orders. So, again, we may be able to re-rate the plant to buy us a little bit of capacity, but we can't add 50% or something like that just through re-rating. It's a nominal increase, incremental increase. But there will be issues. I mean, again, if a plant, if it's properly designed, can operate at capacity just fine. But if you start going over that, certain things, it's just like having a car that's designed to go 70 miles an hour. If you run it at 100 miles an hour all the time, you start having problems.
So clarify for me. You're saying 2 years capacity on the sewer.
18 months to 24 months is probably a fair assessment based on current growth rates.
And how long for us to get everything together and build this thing?
Well, if we're going to go to going to SRF, that's going to be a 2 to 3 year process. It's already designed, so we're going to save that time. The design time is saved, but there are steps and things we still have to submit and go through the hoops and meet their deadlines. So 2 years would probably be optimistic.
So at the current deal, at some point we're going to have to. They're not going to jive. They're going to cross on the deal. At some point in time, we're either going to have to basically moratorium, or we're going to have to find some money.
Right, but again, hopefully, we have no time to spare at this point. But it's potential. If we can get the plant re-rated for a nominal increase, we might come pretty close when the new plant came online, and we reach capacity.
What's the decision we got to make now, Tom?
Well, I mean, it's a workshop. I don't know if you can make any decisions tonight, but
well, we can't tonight, granted. But I'm saying, what do we need to do expeditiously here?
I think that as far as it's kind of similar for both water and wastewater. Commission needs to make a decision. Do we want to expand our plants to handle the growth, projected growth that's occurring, or do we want to go down the moratorium road? I think that's the first decision to be made. If you make decision to expand the plants, then we'll have to lay out a timeline as to when that's going to take place, and you'll be presenting with all the reports and what impact it'll have on rates and all those kind of things. But it's deciding. The big decision is, do we want to expand the plants, or do we just want to go the moratorium route?
Okay. How soon?
Sooner the better.
Okay, no. I'm just saying not 3 months from now, not 2 months from now. It needs to be done.
I think it's sooner rather than later. Yes, sir.
Right. We need to get that on the agenda coming up.
Yes, absolutely. Do we have any other questions, comments, concerns?
So with that said, you all want to know how many vacant lots we still have with the subdivisions that are in place at this point in time and vacant lots in the city, or do we just want to move forward with the information on the table at this point?
I think we need to know the number of approved development, what's already approved for development, that we've said they could build. I think we need to have that number.
Okay, that also, we're gonna have to include vacant lots with that too, because there's vacant lots in town that we're gonna need to count in, not just in subdivisions, but in other areas of town as well. So we'll start getting those numbers together. It's probably gonna take a week or so. I just talked to Kristen and we'll start putting that together tomorrow morning for you.
Right. Anything that would be on sewer and water, we really need to know some ballpark number.
Okay.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, Ms. White's had one more comment she wanted to make. She raised her hand. I'm going to bring her over if you'd like.
Yes.
Ms. White, you're muted, but you are on the commission.
I have a question. When we build a second plant and migrate effluent discharge from spray field to wetland, at what point are we going to eclipse the current footprint? Because the wetland there's a pretty significant land use. Do we have enough land to handle all of that effluent?
Yes, ma'am. Basically the wetlands will be constructed on the area of the existing spray fields. So the application rate is higher than the spray fields. So
then would that give us some expansion capability if we're just discharging to wetlands instead of spray field?
if you go above the 480,000 gallons a day, basically our wetland area is set up to handle 240,000 gallons a day. We're going to basically consume all of that area for wetlands, and our disposal capacity will go to 480,000 gallons a day. So we'll be disposing of twice the volume of effluent as is currently done with the spray fields, with the constructed wetlands.
Without an increase in footprint of the land.
That is correct. There'll be a slight increase on the eastern side, but again, it'll be close to that number, but not a dramatically increased number.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's no further hands being raised right now, Vice Mayor.
All right. Once again, any other questions or comments? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Meeting adjourned at 7:13.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Tim, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
Call me tomorrow, will you?
Okay, certainly. We'll do it.
And you should have my number, I think.
I think we do. Mhm.
Thank you, sir.